It started with a screech. Tires crunching on gravel on my gravel. Every morning, same time, same sound. At first, I thought it was a delivery guy turning around. But no, it wasn't just a quick stop. It was the same silver SUV, same driver. A woman who lived down the road, HOA board member, smug attitude, zero respect. She started parking on the edge of my driveway like it was a public lot. My ranch-style home sits at the edge of the cul-de-sac, and my driveway curves slightly to the right. It's not huge, but it's private. My land. My boundary. And she crossed it like it was hers. At first, I assumed it was temporary. Maybe her garage was full, maybe someone was visiting. I let it go. Then it happened again. And again. Monday through Friday, her SUV sat there from 8 to 5, without fail. She didn't knock. Didn't ask. Just parked. Right in my space, sometimes blocking my gate. It wasn't just inconvenient, it was insulting. I didn't pay for this home to share a driveway. Especially not with someone who acted like she owned the whole block. So I tried the polite route. One morning, I waited until she pulled in. I stepped out, waved calmly, and asked her if she could park somewhere else. She smiled. Not the friendly kind, the kind that says, "You think you matter?" She told me she had permission from the HOA to park there. Said it was technically part of common access. Now, I may not be a lawyer, but I've been around enough to know when someone's full of it. My driveway isn't common access. It's on my deed. It's part of my property. But she didn't care. The HOA backed her up, claimed I couldn't stop her. They called it overflow parking. I called it theft. The next day, her SUV was there again. This time, parked even further up my driveway, like she was daring me. I took a picture. Then another. Every day, I snapped photos and documented the time. I logged every violation. I even called the local non-emergency line, asking if it was trespassing. They said it was a civil matter. Of course. Things escalated fast after that. I woke up one morning to find my trash bins knocked over, my mail soaked from the sprinklers. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe HOA Karen didn't like being told no. Either way, I'd had enough. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I pulled out the paperwork. Deed, property map, county lines, HOA rules, and state laws. I made calls. I spoke to a local attorney who confirmed it. My driveway was entirely private. The HOA had no authority over it. Her SUV had no right to be there. But here's the thing, knowing you're right doesn't always mean things will change. I could file a complaint, hire a lawyer, spend months chasing this. Or I could send a message. Not with words. With concrete. Literal, heavy, unmoving concrete. See, if she wanted to pretend my driveway was shared, then I'd make sure it was clear where my space ended and hers never began. So I headed to the hardware store and bought several bags of quickset concrete. Along with wooden forms, warning signs, and paint. I wasn't going to do anything illegal, just make sure the next time she rolled up, she'd have to think twice. I spent a whole evening prepping the area. No mess. No damage to anyone else's land. I framed a neat little barrier right where her front tires usually stopped. Then I poured the concrete. Smoothed it over. Marked it with a sign, "Private property, do not block." Simple. Direct. And then, I waited. Because Karen had no idea what she was walking into. The next morning felt different. I woke up earlier than usual and stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching my driveway like a hawk. The concrete had set overnight, solid and smooth. The wooden forms were still in place, and the sign was posted clearly in the center. Private property, do not block. There was no mistaking it. I wanted to give her no excuse, no confusion, and certainly no wiggle room. At exactly 7:53 a.m., like clockwork, her silver SUV rounded the bend. She came down the street slow, like she always did, probably scanning for a parking spot. And then, right on cue, she turned into my driveway. I could almost see the surprise on her face when she spotted the new addition. She hit the brakes hard, jerking to a stop halfway up my property. She got out of her car and marched straight toward the concrete block, hands on her hips. She paced around it for a second, reading the sign, staring down at the freshly poured structure like it had personally offended her. I stayed inside and watched. I wasn't interested in a confrontation, not yet. I wanted to see how far she'd push it before realizing her HOA badge didn't give her the power she thought it did. After a few minutes of glaring and mumbling to herself, she whipped out her phone. I couldn't hear the call, but from the dramatic hand gestures and pacing, it didn't take much to figure out who she was dialing. Probably the HOA president. Or maybe even 911. I mean, this is the same woman who once called animal control because my dog barked during the mail delivery. A few minutes later, she drove off in a huff. No apology, no knock on my door, no explanation. Just a retreat. That alone felt like a win. But I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. By noon, I had an email from the HOA. The subject line read, "Violation of Community Harmony Standards." I nearly laughed. They accused me of creating an obstruction that made the neighborhood unsafe for shared access. They demanded I remove the concrete and restore driveway functionality to maintain community peace. Not one mention of Karen's daily trespassing. Not 1 ounce of accountability. That's when I decided to take things up a notch. I replied with attachments, scanned copies of my property deed, zoning map, and photos documenting Karen's illegal parking, complete with timestamps. I explained, politely but firmly, that my driveway was not HOA property, had never been designated for shared access, and that their member had been violating my private boundary for weeks. I also added that the concrete structure did not block access to any public utility, road, or adjacent lot, and that it was well within my rights to mark and protect my property line. The response? Silence. For 2 full days. And then the knock came. Karen again. This time she wasn't pretending to be friendly. No fake smile. No hello. She went straight into yelling the moment I opened the door. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped. "Everyone in the HOA agrees that you're out of line." I let her speak, calmly. I didn't interrupt. Just nodded. Then I asked her one simple question. "Do you believe the HOA owns my driveway?" She blinked. "Well, yes. We all share the space. That's how it works." I handed her the paperwork. "I suggest you read it before making that claim again. This isn't shared space. This is *mine star. Just like your driveway belongs to *you star. The HOA has no say here." She didn't take the papers. Just stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "I've documented everything," I continued. "Every time you parked here. Every call. Every email. If you try to tow me, fine. I'll call the sheriff. If you try to remove the concrete, I'll sue for destruction of private property. You stepped on my rights for weeks. That ends now." She stormed off without another word. But I knew she'd be back. The next few days passed like a quiet storm. You could feel tension in the air, even if everything looked calm on the surface. Karen wasn't parking on my driveway anymore, but she sure wasn't letting it go either. Every time I stepped outside, I could see her blinds shift. Someone was always watching. And when I walked my dog down the street, a few of the other HOA board members gave me those long, awkward stares. You know, the kind, silent judgment wrapped in fake politeness. But I didn't care. I had the facts. I had the law on my side. And I had a rock-solid slab of concrete making the point for me, day and night. Then came the next move. I found a flyer on my front door one morning. Emergency HOA meeting, driveway dispute and community obstruction concern. Just like that. In big, bold letters. As if I were some kind of criminal building roadblocks in a war zone. They were calling an actual meeting. About *me star. My driveway. And my supposed threat to the neighborhood. I didn't respond. I didn't RSVP. I didn't even think about going. Instead, I made sure to set up 2 new security cameras, one facing the driveway, and one covering the mailbox and front door. I'd learned by now that ignoring them didn't mean they'd stop. It just meant they'd sneak around differently. That same evening, I got a visit from one of the more reasonable HOA members, Greg. He's the one who normally just nods and waves during community BBQs. Never had a problem with him. But tonight, he was all business. He asked if we could talk man to man. I agreed. We sat on my porch as the sun dipped low, painting the sky orange. Greg tried to play peacemaker. He said there were concerns about how I handled the situation. That some neighbors felt intimidated by the concrete and sign. He said the HOA felt blindsided, and that Karen just needed a place to park for a few weeks. That's when I lost my patience. I looked Greg straight in the eye and said, "She trespassed. She blocked access to my home. She refused to stop when asked nicely. And then the HOA tried to bully me into giving up my legal rights. How would you feel if someone parked in your driveway every day and the board told you it wasn't really yours?" He didn't answer. I told him I wasn't removing anything. That the HOA had zero claim over my property. That they could meet, vote, gossip, and complain, but it didn't change the law. What I'd done was legal. What Karen did? Not so much. Greg nodded slowly. He said he understood. Then he left without another word. 2 days later, the drama exploded. I was pulling out to run errands when I noticed a tow truck parked across the street. No lights. No action yet. Just sitting there, idling. The driver was looking around like he was waiting for something. Or someone. And then it clicked. Karen. She had called a tow truck to remove my concrete. From my land. I parked my truck at the curb and got out calmly, camera rolling from my phone. I walked right up to the driver and asked what he was there for. He told me he had a removal order from the HOA. Said he was told the structure was illegal and had to be cleared. I smiled. Then I asked him one thing. Do you have documentation from the county or the sheriff approving this removal? He blinked. No, just a work order from the HOA. Then you're trespassing, I said. And if you so much as touch that concrete, you'll be damaging private property. This is your only warning. I showed him my deed. He got back in the truck. Drove away in silence. Karen was watching from her porch the whole time. I waved. And I knew right then, this war wasn't just about parking anymore. It was about power. Control. Pride. But she didn't realize yet I wasn't the one who was going to back down. The morning after the tow truck incident, I thought things might finally cool down. But Karen wasn't done. Not even close. She couldn't stand that I had won round after round, and now, she was determined to get the last word. I just didn't expect her to go to the level she did. I stepped outside around 9 a.m. and immediately noticed something strange. My mailbox was wide open, and the flag was down. That wasn't normal. I always close it tight. I walked over, looked inside, and found nothing. No letters. No flyers. No usual junk mail. It was completely empty. And yet, I'd seen the mail truck pass less than an hour earlier. I didn't jump to conclusions. Maybe the mail got delayed. Maybe they skipped my house. But deep down, I knew something was off. Around noon, I got a knock at the door. It was the county code enforcement officer. He introduced himself politely, but his tone was firm. Said there had been a complaint filed about unpermitted construction obstructing community access and possible environmental runoff violations. That's right, someone had reported my concrete slab as a code violation. I didn't have to guess who. I offered him water and walked him out to the driveway. He studied the concrete for a minute, took some photos, and asked questions. I handed him all the documents I'd already prepared, my property deed, zoning maps, and even printed email exchanges with the HOA. He seemed a little surprised. Said most of these complaints don't come with so much paperwork. I shrugged and told him I like to be ready. After a few minutes, he said, honestly, this doesn't look like a violation. If anything, it looks like you're protecting your property. He took a few more notes and said he'd file the report, but he didn't expect any action would be taken against me. I thanked him and saw him off. As I watched his car drive away, I spotted Karen across the street. Standing by her SUV. Staring, arms crossed. She didn't even blink when I looked her way. That was her plan now. Harass me through official channels. Try to bury me in complaints until something stuck. And I knew what I had to do next. I drove straight to the sheriff's office that afternoon. Not in anger. In preparation. I explained the situation calmly. Laid out everything: trespassing, fake claims, code complaints, even mail tampering, which I now strongly suspected. They took it seriously. A deputy said they'd make a note of the situation and increase patrols in the area. The next morning, I added a lock to my mailbox. That evening, something new happened. I was having dinner when I heard loud voices outside. I opened the door and saw Karen arguing with another neighbor, one of the quiet ones, James, who never got involved in anything. But tonight, he was fed up. He was shouting back at her, telling her to leave people alone and stop dragging the whole block into her drama. A few other neighbors peeked out their windows. Some even came outside. I didn't say a word, I just watched. Karen finally stormed off and slammed her front door. That was the first time I realized I wasn't the only one who had enough of her. The very next day, I got a handwritten note in my mailbox. No name, but it simply read, "Thank you for standing your ground. She's been like this for years. We've all been too quiet." That changed something. I knew this wasn't just about my driveway anymore. It wasn't about concrete or cars. It was about someone who had ruled the neighborhood unchecked, using her title and ego as weapons. And for the first time, someone stood up and said no. So I made a decision. If she wanted a fight, she'd have to bring it in broad daylight. No more silent battles. I printed a large sign and placed it at the end of my driveway for everyone to see. Private property. Trespassing equals prosecution. Documented and enforced. And right below it, in smaller print, HOA has no authority here. That sign stayed up. My cameras stayed rolling. And Karen? She didn't take that well at all. It was 2 days after I put the sign up when Karen made her next big mistake. And this one crossed a whole new line. Around 3 p.m., I was inside reviewing footage from my security cameras, just as a habit now. I didn't expect to see anything out of the ordinary. But as I skimmed through, I paused at something odd. A delivery van stopped in front of my house. That part wasn't strange, but what happened next definitely was. Karen walked straight up to the delivery guy, pointed toward my house, and started arguing. He kept gesturing to the package in his hand, confused. Then she took the package right out of his hands and stormed off toward her house. I couldn't believe it. She literally intercepted a delivery addressed to me. I replayed it twice, then marched outside. She was already back in her driveway, acting like nothing had happened. I stood at the edge of her yard and called out calmly, "Karen, I just saw you take a package meant for me." She didn't even flinch. She said, "It was left in the wrong spot. I'll return it later." But I wasn't having it. "You stole federal mail. You know that's a felony, right?" Her face changed. Still smug, but her tone got sharper. "You've got cameras on everyone now? That's harassment." That's when I walked back into my house, printed out a still image of her holding the package, and taped it right next to my mailbox. Less than 2 hours later, the package appeared back on my porch opened, resealed with cheap tape, and a faint smell of perfume on the cardboard. That was her idea of a threat. A warning. She wanted me to know she could reach into my life whenever she wanted. I contacted the local post office and filed a mail theft report. They were surprisingly helpful and told me this wasn't the first issue reported in our area. The case would be documented and forwarded to the authorities. Another paper trail. The next few days got quieter. No complaints. No tow trucks. No visitors from the HOA. But I could tell Karen was brewing something. She wasn't the kind of person to give up. She was the kind who waited until your guard was down, then struck twice as hard. So I kept mine up. One evening, while trimming the hedges near my driveway, I heard footsteps behind me. It was a man in a suit, tall, serious, holding a folder. "Mr. Jackson?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm with the HOA legal committee. I've been asked to deliver a formal warning. I raised an eyebrow. For what? Owning my land? He didn't laugh. Just handed me the folder and walked off. Inside were 3 typed pages full of legal-sounding nonsense, claims that I had created an unsafe structure, violated neighborhood harmony, refused multiple community requests, and more. It ended with a bold statement. Failure to remove the concrete obstruction within 14 days will result in legal action and potential daily fines. I smiled. Because this was exactly what I was waiting for. I went into my office, pulled out my land survey, the official zoning maps, county ordinances, and 2 signed letters from local law enforcement confirming my right to enforce my own property lines. I scanned everything into a PDF and emailed it straight to the HOA's lawyer along with a polite but clear message. Any further harassment will be forwarded to my attorney. Your claims have no standing. This is a final warning. But I didn't stop there. I shared my entire story online. Just a quiet post on a private neighborhood forum, complete with images, documents, and the timeline of everything that had happened, from the daily trespassing to the stolen mail to the fake legal threats. The response? Immediate. Dozens of neighbors responded. Some were shocked. Others said they had experienced similar harassment but were afraid to speak up. A few even thanked me for exposing what they called the HOA's quiet dictatorship. And among the messages, one stood out. It was anonymous. But it simply read, ***, keep going. She's been doing this for years. You're not the first. Just the first to fight back this hard. ***. Karen may have had a badge from the HOA, but what she didn't have anymore was the silence of the neighborhood. The calm didn't last long. Karen was quiet, but not defeated. She always had one more card to play. And this time, she thought she had the perfect one. 3 days after I posted the timeline online, I came home from the grocery store and found a folded notice stuck between the slats of my front gate. It wasn't from the HOA. It was from a private attorney. Bold letters across the top read, ***, notice of intent to sue. ***. Karen had officially escalated things to a legal battlefield. According to the document, I had intentionally damaged community property, endangered a resident's vehicle, and created hostile living conditions. It even claimed I had spread defamatory information with the intent to discredit HOA leadership. That last part made me laugh out loud. They were trying to sue me for protecting my own land, and for telling the truth. Still, I took it seriously. I scanned the documents, printed a copy, and immediately called my attorney. I explained everything from the start: how Karen parked illegally on my driveway, how I'd warned her multiple times, how I poured concrete only after the harassment didn't stop, and how she continued to make false claims. He listened patiently, then said something I'll never forget. If they want to fight, we'll give them one. But this time, in court, and with the facts on our side. He started drafting a countersuit. While he worked on that, I got busy gathering every last shred of proof. I downloaded weeks of security footage. I dug up the certified mail receipts I'd sent to the HOA. I organized every letter, photo, and voice message. I even took pictures of the concrete slab from every angle and recorded how many feet it was from the property line. Just to be sure. But then something unexpected happened. 2 days later, I got a visit from a man who introduced himself as Michael. Turns out, he was the **** president *** of the HOA. Not Karen. Karen was just the committee chair. She wasn't supposed to be making executive decisions. He asked if we could talk. I was cautious, but I agreed. We sat on my porch with iced tea. He seemed calm, reasonable, even apologetic. I had no idea it had gotten this bad, he said. Karen never reported any of this to the board. She told us you were the one harassing her. I handed him a USB stick with a copy of the footage and the documents. His face changed after the first few minutes. This changes everything. Turns out, Karen had been freelancing her HOA authority. She never brought any of her complaints to a vote. Never submitted any formal reports. She acted entirely on her own, under the HOA's name, with no oversight. Michael promised to bring it to the board immediately. 2 more quiet days passed. Then I received a hand-delivered envelope from the HOA office. Inside was a single-page letter. Effective immediately, Karen has been removed from her position. The HOA formally withdraws all threats of legal action and apologizes for the disruption caused by her unauthorized conduct. I let out a slow breath. But that wasn't the end. My attorney called shortly after and said, "This may be over with the HOA, but we're still filing for damages. Emotional distress. Legal fees. You name it." He wasn't backing down. And neither was I. The day after the letter, I went outside to check the mail and found something new at the end of my driveway, a fresh tire mark on the edge of the concrete. Like someone had tried to drive onto it again, but backed off. A small act. But I knew what it meant. Karen wasn't done. Maybe she had been stripped of her title, but she still had her pride. And pride doesn't go away quietly. That night, I did one last thing. I had a contractor come out and install 4 steel bollards along the edge of my driveway. Painted bright yellow, set in deep concrete. No way around them. When the sun came up, the whole neighborhood could see them shining. Karen saw them too. She stood across the street, hands on hips, just staring. I didn't wave. I didn't speak. I just stood on my porch, on my land, and watched her walk away. The next few weeks were strangely peaceful. No more surprise notices. No mystery tire marks. Karen had vanished from the HOA scene entirely. Her name didn't even show up in the newsletter. It was like she had been scrubbed out of existence by the very organization she once ruled. But peace, as I had learned, never lasts too long when pride and petty grudges are involved. One crisp morning, I stepped out with my coffee and found something waiting for me. Not a person, not a letter this time, it was something far more childish. Someone had dumped an entire bag of garden soil on my newly installed bollards. Just enough to make a mess. Just enough to send a message. It didn't hurt anything. It didn't even take long to clean. But it was petty. Passive-aggressive. And exactly Karen's style. I didn't react. I just cleaned it up. Quietly. But I took pictures. I checked the camera footage. Sure enough, just before sunrise, a figure in a hoodie walked up, looked around, and dumped the bag before quickly scurrying off. You couldn't see the face clearly, but the way they moved, it was familiar. I sent the footage to my lawyer. He simply replied with, "Document everything. Don't engage." And that's what I did. I kept to myself. Maintained my land. Took photos of everything suspicious. Kept the cameras rolling. Meanwhile, the community started changing. Neighbors I'd never spoken to before started waving when they passed. A few even came up to thank me. "Didn't know we were allowed to push back," one said. "I always thought the HOA was untouchable," another added. People were tired. They had been tiptoeing around invisible rules for years. And seeing someone stand up gave them the nudge they needed. Soon, small things began to shift. Fewer anonymous complaint notes appeared on doors. More homeowners showed up to HOA meetings. Some even ran for open committee seats. It was like the whole neighborhood had been holding its breath and now, finally, they were breathing. Then, the unexpected happened. One morning, an official letter from the county arrived in my mailbox. Not HOA. County. I opened it carefully, my stomach twisting just a bit. But what I read made me stop in my tracks. The county had launched an investigation into ** improper authority exercised by HOA officers **. And Karen's name was mentioned. Apparently, mine wasn't the only case. Several residents had submitted complaints about forged notices, fake fines, and threats of legal action without board approval. And now, with my documentation and video footage, the county had opened a formal inquiry. They requested a statement. I gave them everything. Suddenly, Karen wasn't just dealing with annoyed neighbors, she was facing county investigators, real lawyers, and actual consequences. And from what I heard, the HOA board wasn't standing by her anymore. Not after everything came to light. Karen's silence became even louder after that. No more petty games. No drive-bys. No smug glances from across the street. Her house sat quiet, blinds drawn, car barely moving. But the story wasn't quite over yet. 2 weeks later, a for sale sign went up in Karen's front yard. No one said a word. No one needed to. She left just as quietly as she'd once arrived, no goodbye, no explanation, no final act of defiance. Just an empty house, an abandoned title, and a community that had finally found its voice. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about respect. About standing up when someone crosses the line and thinks they're untouchable. Karen underestimated that. She mistook silence for weakness. But this time, the silence spoke louder than anything. And all I had to do was hold the line. The day the moving truck pulled into Karen's driveway, half the neighborhood watched from behind curtains and porches. It was surreal. 4 years, she ruled this community like a self-appointed queen, barking out fines, enforcing rules that didn't exist, and making life miserable for anyone who didn't play by her twisted version of the book. And now, she was leaving without fanfare. No goodbye. No farewell party. Not even a box labeled HOA documents. Just a red-faced man and 2 younger movers trying to carry out her massive armoire that used to sit in the window facing my property. I remember her once bragging that it was made of imported mahogany. Now it looked like dead weight. I stayed out of sight. Not to hide, just to avoid any unnecessary drama. I didn't want her to think I needed a final word. She'd lost. Everyone knew it. Still, curiosity tugged at me, so I walked the fence line slowly, just far enough to see without being obvious. That's when I noticed something odd. On the ground, near the edge of her front yard, were several trash bags, each one tied up hastily and piled next to the HOA's community mailbox. One bag had split open slightly. Inside, I caught a glimpse of paper. A thick stack. I waited until the movers were distracted, then wandered over. What I found stunned me. Meeting notes. Printed emails. Old warning letters. Even some forged notices. All dumped like garbage. All with her signature or initials on them. I didn't take them, didn't need to. I snapped a few photos with my phone. Evidence was always good to have, just in case the story wasn't quite finished. And knowing Karen, she might try to rewrite the ending. By the time she drove away alone, in the back seat of a dusty SUV, the entire neighborhood seemed lighter. Like someone had lifted a top from over our homes. The air didn't feel so heavy. In the weeks that followed, the community shifted into something I hadn't seen in years. The new interim HOA board held a neighborhood meeting, an open-air one on the park lawn, with folding chairs and lemonade. No hidden agendas. No surprise fines. Just real conversation. Real people. One of the new board members, a retired teacher named Clara, walked over to me afterward. "You know," she said, "you didn't just stand up for yourself. You taught the rest of us that we could too." I smiled, not because I felt like a hero, but because I remembered how helpless I felt when it all started. How it seemed easier to ignore Karen than to fight back. But ignoring only gave her more room. Around that same time, my driveway became a bit of a neighborhood landmark. People started calling it the line. Not just because of the bollards, but because it marked the moment everything changed. The place where someone said, "no more." A young couple even stopped by one afternoon to ask if they could take a photo in front of it. I laughed, but I said yes. Why not? One morning, a small package arrived on my porch. No name. No return address. Inside was a brand new mailbox flag and a small note. "Thanks for showing us how to stand our ground." It was simple, but it hit hard. As the months rolled on, I got fewer stares and more smiles. People waved. Some even brought over pie. Real community stuff, not the artificial kind Karen tried to force through awkward HOA events no one wanted to attend. I even helped the neighbor next door repaint their fence. Not because it was required, but because they asked, and I wanted to. That's how communities should work. Not with threats and fines, but with kindness and boundaries. The HOA, under its new leadership, began reviewing every old rule. Every outdated policy. They scrapped half of them and invited input on the rest. They even made a new rule: no board member could act on their own without majority approval. That one got a standing ovation at the next meeting. Looking back, it's wild how fast things changed. One driveway. One decision. One bucket of concrete. Karen thought she could walk over people forever. What she didn't realize was that sometimes, the ground fights back. And when it does, the ones doing the walking learn just how quickly power can shift when truth shows up. This wasn't just about my driveway. It became about the whole neighborhood remembering who it really belonged to.